Hey everyone, I'm Nick DiMatteo and welcome to week 206 and video episode number 32 of Music is Not a Genre. I don't have hand signals for the new name yet. Yes, there is a new name. If you tuned in last week, you heard me saying that the Thursday throwback track is not going to be called that any longer because it wasn't specific enough to what it was I am doing, what it has evolved into over the last 4+ years. And Music is Not a Genre better encapsulates not just this podcast, but everything that I am doing on YouTube and in my career in general. And this week is no exception. It's actually kind of awesome how it ties in. So every week, as you know, I take a release from my collection, I discuss it, I give my take on it, I throw in some things that connect other things, and I talk about how it's influenced my music as well. This week, the title of this one is Who the Fuck is ZEITMAHL? So if you tuned in a couple of weeks ago, you heard me talk about two mix albums, which were the kinds of things that people still do, but back then they did it all on vinyl and on cassette too, but mostly the serious people did it on vinyl. I didn't know where they came from and did some research and everything and kind of found out some information. This week, completely different kind of music, but it's the same vein, which is I couldn't remember much about this particular album here, which is called First Impressions of My Idiosyncrasies, and you have to look closely at the title there to see how it is. It's spelled differently and stuff like that. Other than some vague memory of how I got it, and so I had to really do some research and look it up, and it was fun, and it was fun also to re-listen to it. But I will get to that. So. One thing I talk about a lot is memory and how we tend to rewrite things. I think I talked about that a lot last week. And, this week it has to do with realizing that not only do you not remember what you thought you did, you also don't know as much as you think you do. In fact, the more you learn, I realize the less that you actually know about the world. There's just too much. You never know as much as you want to know if you're that kind of person. But searching and finding information is that's what makes it so fun, because you're kind of adding little tidbits to the things that you don't know and filling in the blanks. This is a band again, like I said, ZEITMAHL. They are actually online, they or he, and what I found out is this. Well, first let me tell you about how I got this album. So this album is from 1992, and back then I was just getting started and thinking about a career professionally. I had just released my own EP, and I was shopping it around to record labels and stuff like that. And I had friends who were also equally into music, whether or not they were musicians. And one of them, if I'm remembering correctly, and like I said, probably not, took me to, I want to say, an album release party, perhaps. And it was at a giant house, and I'm going to say it was in the Philadelphia suburbs, although it could have been in the Philly suburbs in New Jersey. I'm not sure, which is where I'm from originally. And I don't know how this friend knew this guy, but he knew him somehow. I think they were close in age, something like that, from the Philly area. And so he took me to this party where they were giving away their new album, which I'm pretty sure this was the first album that this ZEITMAHL ever released, is from what I can find online anyway. And I remember the house being freaking huge, and the recording studio, being better than some of the professional studios that I'd been in up until then and subsequent to that. And I remember that the guy was chill. He was very unassuming, very kind of eager to share his music, but he seemed like a pretty okay guy. And I don't remember doing a lot of talking. I remember doing some talking, but I remember something very specific about that night that has to do with how it kind of pushed me forward, and that is that I realized that this dude was super into techno, super into electronic music, let's say, and I was into it. I had been a DJ for years before then, and it was still stuff that I worked on at home because I didn't have a band at the time and things like that. but it made me realize I was not into it nearly as much as he was in terms of the act of creating it at the time. And shortly after that, and shortly after that first EP that I put out, I started to slowly morph into wanting more live instruments, getting together with bands. I joined actually 2 bands that year, one of which went on to do a bunch of different things, and albums and performances and stuff like that. I eventually put my own bands together, and I recorded music from then on as a full band for many of my releases after that, until maybe 15 years later, my music then started to morph back into having some electronic elements. And when band members started to go their separate ways, I started to just also coincidentally get reinterested in electronic music again. So then the music post still had elements of live instruments and everything, but had the electronic too, and it kind of melded everything that I'm about into one. But I remember this particular party and this music telling me, no, this is not where you want to go right now, and which is kind of cool in and of itself. It's that, it creates that connection to something I wouldn't otherwise have a connection to, other than I was there, I met the guy, I got the album. Also, that we were both from Philly, or from, I was born in Philly, and he's from the Philly area. I don't know where he is now, which, by the way, the he I'm talking about is this person who calls himself Shock, S-H-O-K. I couldn't find a real name for him. But it was enough to get me to see that he's on Spotify, he's on YouTube, he's on Facebook. I friended him on Facebook just to see if I could get more information, honestly, and just say hello and stuff like that. But it's interesting, the connection that I could find based on scant information. It was more than I remember it being, faulty memory. And I've been doing that a lot more lately, kind of looking back and reaching back to people I've worked with and seeing what's going on with them and kind of checking out their connections and stuff like that. And honestly, it's really cool. That's me digressing. So here's something I haven't done much of, which is actually talk about the music that, we're talking about this week. And if you notice from last week, I'm not playing music anymore during my podcasts. I like the idea. I thought it worked fairly well, but I'm in the process of expanding what I'm doing here and kind of bringing these podcasts to people in other ways. And one of those ways is audio only. It makes it a lot harder to do that when there's music in the background. I put a link up, as always, to both information on this album. It's not online, so you can't hear it, unfortunately, and to a song of mine from around that same time that had a techno, influence. It was techno, but that's it as far as being able to hear. But I would recommend looking up Shock, S-H-O-K. I would put Shock and ZEITMAHL in the search, because otherwise you're going to come up with a visual artist from Britain named Shock, I believe, and you're not going to want that one. But yeah, so anyway, I haven't talked about the actual music, and that was partly because I hadn't listened to it again until today. I think it'd been that long since I listened to it, almost 3 freaking decades. And I gotta say, I really liked it. It had what it said online was, I think, electro, industrial, goth, techno, or something like that. And it did have all those elements. It has the goth and the techno. It has a little bit of rock and kind of funk in there, pop, some pop melodies. It's got an industrial feel with some glitchiness and samples and stuff like that. It even has some hip hop. And me well enough to know, hopefully by now, that I like things that mesh things together, because that just further proves that, genres and labels are bullshit, right? So this is one of those things where I was like, oh, this is not just straight up one thing, and that's really cool to me. And, even the lyrics were diverse. There's some social commentary, there's some relationship stuff, you got a little bit of expression of anger and psychology and all that. And what it sounded to me like was Philly. And you may not know that much about music from Philly other than maybe some doo-wop, some hip-hop, some Philly soul, some things like that. There are some bands that have been popular throughout the, decades that came from Philly or the area. Pink herself is from that area, people like that. Joan Jett's actually from not too far from there, I believe Ardmore, Pennsylvania. And, all that said, what Philly always was to me was this kind of melting pot of music. It people there love music, and they love music in a way that to me is almost less, I would say, discriminatory than the music fans that I know from other areas, and honestly, including New York City. There's a lot of diversity in New York City. But there's a lot of, I think, kind of almost snootiness about the kind of music you listen to. And it's not to say that wasn't there in Philly too, but you can, I don't know, maybe talk to other people in Philly and see if I'm telling it like it is. But my experience, and the experience a lot of people I know, was that you never just listened to one kind of music. You didn't absorb one kind of music. And so then what came out always had some kind of a mesh of things. I am even thinking of bands now that had like a mesh of rock and techno and things like that. If you've listened to my music, you can hear that my influences are all over the place. And that's for a good reason, So it was kind of cool to hear this and realize that whatever differences we might have in our interests and how we developed and our sound and stuff like that, that he also came from a place that had that kind of willing diversity, I would say, the willingness to really expose yourself to a lot of things and to put them all together. And that's what he did. We would put them all together and listen to some of his work more recently. Same kind of thing. It's a real mishmash, but in a very, very good way. So that's kind of cool. And if you want to hear an example of what I'm talking about of mine from that same period, click the link in the text there. It goes to a song called Reflections, which was the sort of title track and sort of single from the EP that I released, which was really primarily meant for industry, although I did perform it here and there, including a performance with John Whitehead from McFadden and Whitehead of this song. And you can hear that it's techno, it's dance, it's got some rock, it's pop, it's all that. Doesn't sound really much of anything like ZEITMAHL or Shock, but it has that same kind of mishmash influence to it. And it was, like I said, one of the last techno things that I did straight up for many, many, many years. I hope you've enjoyed this trip down memory lane with me. It's been very elucidating. I like to mix it up even in how I do podcasts or what I talk about and not just in the subjects themselves. And sometimes these things are kind of rapid fire. I've got a lot to say, etc. And sometimes I've just, whatever comes to mind, and that's what's happening. So, yes, as always, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Thank you for reading the text below. Thank you for clicking on the links, especially the link at the bottom, way at the bottom. And thank you for subscribing. Please do subscribe. If you have not subscribed, it's the best way to know when I'm releasing, new music, new podcasts, new anything, new live performances. And if you are of a mind to share or anything like that, do that too. I will be off next week. I have a little fun vacation planned, so I will see you again in 2 weeks, and signing off with my normal, which is, as always, it's not just about the music, it's about conversation and connection. Take care.